As we learn about the listening process, we learn that it's not just the casual event that we sometimes think of. I hear someone saying something and so I respond. We have learned to take apart the act of listening and dissect it into 6 interrelated behaviors. We emphasize the word behavior because listening is something that we must purposefully perform. Using the HURIER approach to listening, we have looked at hearing, understanding, remembering, interpreting, and now this video will tackle evaluating. The process of evaluating refers to critically analyzing the information you're hearing. You've taken the time to understand the meaning the other is trying to create, and now it's important to apply critical listening skills to that message. In looking at critical listening, we should look at how critical listeners prepare to listen, how critical listeners evaluate the credibility of the speaker, and how to evaluate the message. So, first, how do critical listeners prepare to listen? Critical listeners are not negative listeners. They are simply people who are going to really think about the information and examine the message for its validity and truth. A critical listener is one who's not afraid to listen. She or he has an open mind in every conversation. We all have attitudes, beliefs, and values. Just because someone is discussing a different viewpoint, we should not immediately go into defense mode and shut down our brain and then get ready to argue. Instead, be open to modifying your position. Consider all aspects of what the other person is saying, and be interested in hearing how other people might view things. Also, don't be trapped into seeing extreme positions. There's a lot of gray between black and white. Critical listeners display more concern for relationships than in being right. Therefore, they take the time to hear people out. That's the first step in critical listening and evaluating. Second, how do critical listeners evaluate the credibility of the speaker? I just got a new used car. I can tell you that the car, a 2008 Corvette, has a 6.2-liter engine. But if I were to start telling you much more than that about the details of the engine, you should immediately stop listening. Why? Because I really don't know anything about the inner workings of engines. When listening to someone, a critical listener has to listen for credibility clues. What clues is the listener providing that they might be qualified to speak on the subject? Evaluate whether you can trust the knowledge or information, and whether the speaker is sincere and trying to honestly share accurate information. This is the second step to critical listening and evaluating. Now, before I give you the third step, you should probably know another one of the final exam questions. What are logical fallacies? And give several specific examples from the textbook. The final exam question really introduces the next step. Third, how do critical listeners evaluate the message? You should begin evaluating any message by sorting out the facts, opinions, and the inferences. Facts can be verified by evidence. Opinions are not facts, they're conclusions that people come to based on information combined with the person's attitudes, beliefs, and values. Opinions sometimes make a lot of sense, and other times are just the result of a pure emotional reaction. Inferences, unlike facts, are not arrived at because of direct observation. They are possibly a good guess. It might be a probable conclusion based on information. Sometimes people infer a conclusion based on what they think they know or based on bits of information put together. A solid way to examine what is being said after you've sorted out the facts from the opinions and the inferences is to examine the evidence and the reasoning the person is presenting. Remember that claims without evidence to back it up really just makes the information opinion. Try to mentally organize the evidence and if the person is making sense logically. If the person is using hasty generalizations, putting things into an either-or framework, or possibly arguing the point by insulting the other position, you know to watch out for the conclusion they are attempting to make. Evaluating or critically listening is not an easy task. Remember that it certainly doesn't mean to be negative. In fact, you should instead be open to listening, but then listen carefully to measure the credibility of the person speaking on the subject. And finally, learn to listen for evidence and the logic the person is using to bolster their position. After you do this, you can then thoughtfully respond. But that's the subject of another video. See you in the next video.